Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Well, just to kick off, first please pray for Nat. She's in the mid of a cold Arctic storm. Her internet has been wiped out, her router's been whatever. Really, really cold. And I can see from people in the side chat that in Europe as well, it's really cold, and it's good to see you guys here. And yeah, it's just a week before Christmas. It's amazing how time flies. And what I've got for us here is the pre-recording of the discussion I had with Dawie Roodt earlier today. And it was a really interesting informal discussion. It's more like a fireside chat. And we even debated a few things which were, we have different perspectives on, which was a lot of fun. Okay, let's cross directly to that. This is taken a few hours ago, and this is Dawie Roodt, one of South Africa's top economists, talking about what is going on in South Africa. Hi Dawie, good to see you again, mate.
Hello, very nice talking to you as well, Scott. Long time.
It has been a long time. Now, Dawie, since we last spoke, the proverbial has really hit the fan in South Africa. I mean, big time.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the elephant in the room, which is Eskom. Now, tell me what your perspective is on the impact of what is happening when it comes to Eskom on the economy of South Africa.
Yeah, we have something in South Africa called load shedding.
All about it. Mate, before you go any further, I've had 4 live streams cancelled this week. I mean, we're on Friday now. I've had 4 live streams cancelled this week because of load shedding. Yeah, back
all right. Now, South Africa's power utility called Eskom has been infiltrated by, what can I call, criminal gangs and political gangs. And as we know, the South African government, the ANC government, is an exceptionally inefficient government, and in some instances highly corrupt as well. And there are many people with high political connections at Eskom. And the result of all of this is that the power utility basically collapsed, or is in a state of collapse. And because of that, we don't have enough electricity in South Africa. So what they need to, and they appointed a guy recently with the name of Andre de Ruyter for the past 2 years, which is a good guy, trying to stabilize the electricity grid and stabilized Eskom in South Africa. But he encountered so many problems and resistance and criminality and all that. But he made some progress, and of course a huge political pressure on him as well. Even from some ministers calling him, just telling him that he's trying to undermine the state, and because there's no choice. They don't have any choice but to literally switch off electricity now and again in order to maintain the power stations and to make sure that it's not going to be an even bigger problem.
Was that Montashi? Was it the Minister of Minerals and stuff like that?
Yeah. So this is the most difficult job in South Africa, and that's to run the Eskom.
Yeah.
So there's this guy trying to fix Eskom that was destroyed basically because of the incompetence and everything that goes with the ANC government.
Yeah.
And he's making some progress. But inevitably that meant that they need to cut the power off some, and there need to be blackouts every now and again, which got a huge negative impact on the economy as well in itself. And of course there's an election in about 18 months time in South Africa, and the government doesn't want its electricity to be, do not want these blackouts, because these blackouts are going to cost them votes. So there's this Minister Gweri Mantashe, and there's probably some skeletons in his closet as well, and we can talk about that as well. And he's attacking this guy in public, and the guy eventually said, listen, I've had enough, I'm going to go. And he resigned the last couple of days. So that is really bad for us. But in the meantime, electricity just keeps on going off. And in fact, at the moment, electricity is down here where I am sitting. And I was forced to put on a solar system in my house. So I've got a nice solar system with the battery backups and all that. So I have electricity.
Yeah.
So in a weird kind of way, in a really ironic kind of way, this ANC government, which is a left-wing kind of government, I say kind of because they don't understand their own policies or their own ideologies even, but they call themselves a developmental government, which means they want to interfere in people's lives as much as possible. But in a weird kind of way, this socialist, incompetent government that we have in South Africa is actually privatizing everything. And they're not privatizing everything in a conventional manner. What they do,
they're destroying everything that's public.
Yeah, the things simply come to an end. They simply stop working. And there are many examples. South African Airways is a good example. The post office in South Africa has gradually coming to an end. And if you want to send stuff around in South Africa, do what the post office is supposed to be doing, then you have to do it yourself. So the private sector is stepping in and doing these kind of things. And that's happening with Eskom as well.
Why are people paying taxes then?
People are evading taxes big time, or trying to at least.
Well, I mean, but why are they paying taxes is my question, because the government does nothing.
No, the thing is, not nothing, they do a few things, but we don't have a good government. The thing is, when it comes to taxes, it's very difficult. South Africa's got an exceptionally complex and efficient tax regime. I would say far too complicated for a developing country like South Africa, but it is really working quite well, very, very well. And we have a few individuals in South Africa, and I say a few individuals because a few financial directors at large companies in South Africa is responsible for paying over the bulk of the total tax stake over to Treasury. Let me give you one example. Fewer than 1,000 companies, in fact about 750 companies in South Africa, pay approximately 2/3 of all company taxes. Of all company taxes.
I bet none of them are American based.
Some, well, I don't have the list of all the companies, I guess I can get that, but I would say they're the large listed companies in South Africa. Remgro.
What I'm talking about is tax evasion by foreign companies.
I don't think that is really happening that much in South Africa. Like I've said, the South African tax system is really quite efficient and effective. And remember, those financial directors are also responsible for paying over personal income taxes because they deduct that from the salaries of the employees. And they're also responsible for paying over the other major tax, and that is value-added tax.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to really evade taxes in South Africa, even if you want to. But it's happening, and a very good example of that are the toll roads in South Africa. We've got some toll roads, and there's the toll people, and you're supposed to pay.
No one does.
People just stop paying, and they scrapped it recently. Yeah. They said, okay, well, there's nothing we can do about that. People are not paying, so we're not good. So I don't know where they're going to get the money to pay off the debt of Summerall. Summerall is the road agency that built these toll roads. So it's a mess everywhere you look.
Yeah.
But the point I want to make is that because of a lack of electricity, I've made some calculations that the South African economy just cannot grow faster than a rate of about 1.5% because we just don't have enough electricity. Based on the past 2 or 3 years, the blackouts that we've had, we call it load shedding, the economy can't grow faster than 1.5%. And if there's an additional obstacle in the road, then the economy can't grow at 1.5% either. It will go down to less than that, say 1% or whatever. And it's not only my number, it's even our Minister of Finance predicts that over the next couple of years, economic growth in South Africa will be between 1 and 1.5%. So, I mean, even our own Minister of Finance does not have confidence in his own government or in his own policies. If only he could lie a little bit and say, listen, economic growth is going to be 2% or 3%. So we've got 1.5% economic growth sort of baked into the economy, and a population growth of also about 1.5%. That means that we're not making any progress whatsoever. And that's the reason why we have very high levels of unemployment and poverty and everything that goes with that. We've got tens of millions of people that are on the dole that receive a grant from the state every month. We have approximately half of the South African population receives some sort of grant from the state every month. And we've got and the tax base in South Africa is very, very narrow. And those taxpayers many taxpayers, especially personal income taxpayers, they're simply immigrating out of the country, or they do whatever they can to pay as little tax as possible. So the state's finances is not very healthy at the moment, although the new Minister of Finance, what's his name, is doing actually not too bad a job, because he's trying to keep us sort of the state purse. He tries to keep that a little bit close as much as they possibly can, but there's huge political pressure on him to expand the social security system, and of course to keep on giving unrealistic wage increases to civil servants and so on.
Yeah,
civil servants is a bit of a misnomer in South Africa. Let's rather say people that get paid by the state. They don't necessarily work.
Yeah.
We've got a highly inefficient civil service in South Africa, and they are completely, and not all of them, of course, but they're mostly overpaid and mostly underworked. So there we have it. We've got economic, and in the meantime, we've got an election in 18 months' time. So there's no time to fix the economy. There's only time now to try to make sure that you get your votes again at the next general election. And the very good news in South Africa is that I think chances are very good that the ANC government will get well below 50%. So we're talking about coalition governments going forward. So first we need to fix our political problem before we can fix our economic problem.
All right. Now, you just raised another elephant in the room, because there are two parties that the ANC could join with to form a coalition. The one is the Democratic Alliance, and the other is the Economic Freedom Fighters. Now, they're radically different. We all know Julius Malema talks about killing the whites, killing the Boers. We know the Democratic Alliance are very tied up with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who paid them 60 million rand this year. And of course, suddenly Alan Wind in the Western Cape is now pushing the vaccine in schools. Interesting. But two very different political coalitions. Give me a forecast on what would happen in either scenario.
Okay, so we have three political parties in South Africa. We've got the African Nationalist Congress, ANC, which is the biggest political party, the ruling party at the moment. They have been there for the past more than 25 years.
Yeah.
Then we have, on the far left, well, I don't really know if we should put them on the far left or the far right. It's a populist political party called the Economic Freedom Fighters. It's a party that's been doing quite well recently. And then somewhere on the right of the ANC is the Democratic Alliance. So the support of the ANC, what I think is going to happen, I think the support is going to fall well below 50%. And it depends how far below 50%. If they get, say, between 45 and 50%, then it will be possible for the ANC to form a coalition with some of the other smaller political parties. And there are a couple of smaller ones as well, pushing just over 50%. So I think that is a possibility, an ANC-led government with some of the smaller political parties. If they fall below 45%, then they will have to approach one of the either the EFF or the DA. Now, I think the EFF could get, say, around about 15%, maybe 20%. I don't think they're going to get 20%.
I think they've maxed out at 15, but anyway, yeah.
So 15 roundabout.
Yeah.
So if they get, say, 40%, then they probably will have to either approach the EFF or the DA.
Yeah.
I think the only option for them will be to approach the EFF, because I think it will be not a clever move for the Democratic Alliance to go into coalition with the ANC government. I don't think that will be a clever move from a DA, because you do not want to be associated with the ANC. So chances are quite good that we could see an ANC-EFF coalition government after the next general election. There is a small possibility that the DA and a bunch of the other smaller political parties, depending on how things turn out, that they can form a coalition as well, but I don't think that is likely. It will be, so in the next government, you will have either or you will have either the ANC and the EFF in government. So one of those two parties will be in government. I think that's inevitable, and that's not good news. But that means South Africa is heading for a coalition government, and a coalition government, I think, is not going to work well in South Africa. And what we are currently seeing, and that's the good news, I'm very excited about that, we are seeing the end of the ANC. But it's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride. And we know this ANC government, they've shown themselves to be highly corrupt.
Yeah.
And it's not impossible that they would try to steal the election as well. So that is a big next challenge for South Africa's democracy.
Yeah.
And to see if we can really pull this off.
Well, look, I have to say that John Steenhuisen or Julius Malema as deputy president, to me, in the coalition it's like two bad eggs. I don't know which is worse. It's just so sad. But let's move on to the elections in 2024. Now, that's going to be a critical stage in South Africa's history, because the country right now is in a whole lot of shit. In fact, the videos I've been putting out in the last week from people who've been sending me stuff about what's going on in Durban, and Schlanger Rocks and the beaches on Durban, I mean, it's disgusting. I call Durban a city of shit now. It's not a tourist.
It really is a shithole, literally.
But doesn't that say something about where South Africa is right now?
Yeah, okay, let's just see if we can find the silver lining here first. I guess there are a couple of things going kind of okay. I did mention that we are privatizing everything. So many things are actually working quite well. Those things that the private sector has taken over. Let me give you a good example. We've privatized the police in South Africa.
Yeah, it's security companies now.
Yeah, we've got more than 3 times as many private security people in South Africa than policemen in South Africa. So that in a way is good news. Is that this is a weird experiment in the world where the private sector is taking over everything basically, and they're doing it well. But it's very expensive to do this, and it's very inefficient, this whole process.
Yeah.
Another silver lining is the South African Central Bank, the Reserve Bank. The governor of the South African Central Bank is doing a very good job, I must tell you that.
Yeah.
He started early in the cycle to increase interest rates. He's increased interest rates quite a lot, and he will continue to do that, and that's very painful. And politicians don't like high interest rates, especially if there's a looming election. So politicians do not like what the central bank is doing, but he's independent, he's doing what needs to happen, and I support him, and people generally support him as well. We haven't seen much attacks on the central bank, political attacks on the central bank recently, but a couple of years ago there was a lot. So, but I suspect that we're going to hear about that again soon, attacks on the Reserve Bank. But he's doing an excellent, really, really good job. If it hasn't been for him, then I'm afraid the rand would have been even weaker than what it is. Another good thing is that we have an excellent Chief Justice in South Africa. Raymond Zondo has been appointed as a Chief Justice in South Africa.
Yeah.
He's really a good guy. He stands up when the politicians criticize the bench, for example, and so on. He's a good guy, and I think there's a lot of confidence in the judiciary in South Africa, especially the senior courts like the Constitutional Court, But for the rest of the courts, the more junior courts, that's not very efficient, but there's a lot of respect for the judiciary in South Africa. So that's certainly some good news there. But I'm afraid if you look at the rest of the economy, like I've said, the economy cannot grow because of various factors. We've got a government that's doing the most horrible things. They're doing stupid policy things, like preventing certain scrap metals from being exported. So the reason why they put in this legislation is because everybody is stealing, or there's a lot of crime going on in the country, and infrastructure. Yeah, but they steal train stations. I'm not talking about something. They steal a whole station, even the bricks.
That's crazy. Look, I just want to join a few dots for people who are listening. I saw a video that came out just the last few days where there was literally 20 people in a gang who were tearing apart a building in Durban. And the guy who was filming it said, look, I phoned the police, told them that this is happening, and he was filming, you could see them tearing out the aluminium windows, and, you know, they were putting them into these wheelie bins, and they were going to be taken off somewhere. And he said, I phoned the police, and they said, well, we're not coming out, they should have private security. Now, what is Bekesele's job? I mean, seriously, this is the police saying that, look, we're not interested, we're not coming out, they should have had private security.
Yeah, but the police, now this is not a joke, there are instances where the police use private security to protect the police station.
Oh no, like in July last year.
Yeah, but what I'm very concerned about, we're laughing, but this is a very serious matter, yeah, because of the high levels of poverty and unemployment, and there's huge dependency on the state, and the state's finances simply not capable of keep on spending so much money. Now they want to increase state spending by introducing a basic income grant. It's basically a grant, a permanent kind of grant, to make some of these grants permanent, but some of these grants are not permanent. And we simply cannot afford that. And what I'm very concerned about, especially in an environment where we have relatively high inflation, especially food inflation, people get angry. And you need some sort of spark. And the election is around the corner for another 18 months or so.
Yeah.
And we saw what happened last year with Zuma and all that.
Yeah.
So I'm very concerned about some political development or some stupid politician saying something or doing something stupid, and they do it all the time, which could spark a whole social upheaval and all that. So I'm really concerned about that. I think our political leaders got to be aware of the frustration out there, of the poverty out there, and of the unemployment out there. And some people simply do not have confidence in government, and now they keep on saying these stupid things like Montage about Andre de Ruyter, the guy that's trying to fix Eskom. We can't do these sort of things. And many other things that they say. So what the point I'm making, we're sitting on something, on a really toxic mix, and things can really go horribly wrong if we don't be careful on what we're doing and saying. And Sele, our Minister of Police, I mean, this guy,
he's an idiot. He really is.
Yeah, he doesn't know too well. But anyway, so we've got really big government.
Mate, look, I've on the very serious aspect here, and this is really what's so sad about what's happening in South Africa. I have contact with a huge amount of South Africans, and most of them are what you would call the traditional middle class. And most of them right now are maxed out on their credit cards. They are maxed out on everything. They're battling to see how they're going to see through the next month because of everything that's going on in South Africa. How is this going to impact the country? Because the middle class used to be the building block for the country, and now it's basically gone.
Yeah, you must. That's a very difficult question to answer. Let me give you sort of a high-level overview of the various, let's call it, classes in South Africa. We've got very, very poor people living in squatter camps.
Yeah.
They are unemployed, completely unemployed, but they make a living by like by collecting scrap metal or plastics or paper, for example, or doing odd jobs here and there or whatever. And people don't die. Well, there are people dying of hunger in South Africa, just by the way, kids especially. Yeah. But it's not like people are, you don't pick up dead bodies next to the road. It's not like people make a plan. So the informal sector in South Africa is much larger than what most economists expect. But you get the really poor people living in these shanty towns, and they're hungry. And many of them are from Zimbabwe and other failed countries coming to South Africa, because South Africa is still, relatively speaking, quite a rich country in the region. Then you get the middle class in South Africa, which is a smallish middle class, but you got two levels of the middle class. You get the lower middle class; those are people with jobs, and they are really going through a difficult time at the moment because of high levels of debt and rising interest rates, weak economic growth, and increasing levels of unemployment and stuff. So the lower middle class is really going through a tough time. And then you get the higher middle class, and the higher middle class are not rich people. The higher middle class are typically civil servants. They are actually remunerated quite well. And then you've got sort of the top class in South Africa, and they're doing really well because they've got the necessary skills. And with the state collapsing around you, you can use your money to sort of create this safety cocoon around you. And there are many opportunities. Don't make a mistake in South Africa, really opportunities, but you really get this divide. And there's this gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's widening and getting bigger in South Africa. And that concerns me a little bit. But we don't really have a middle class. Well, we have a middle class, but I mean, it's just a low middle class. They are under a tremendous pressure, and some of them are actually falling out of the lower middle class into the really poor income category in South Africa, and there are many of them. So the unemployment rate in South Africa, we have about 10 million people that are unemployed. We have approximately 14 million people that are employed, and of that 14 million people, 2 million of them work for the state. So they are basically grant recipients, most of them. Anyway, so that's more or less what the various classes look like in South Africa. But if you analyze the economy, the parts of the economy that is growing is mostly the service industry, the more advanced side of the economy, finance, for example. Recently, we saw a bit of a uptick in manufacturing growth, but it's mostly the more advanced side of the economy that's growing, and that's, of course, where you need good skills, and that's where you find the more wealthy people. And then also the part of the economy that's quite volatile, but that's been doing not too badly the past year or two, are the primary side of the economy. That's mostly agriculture. We've got excellent farmers in South Africa. They are really feeding the region, but they're under tremendous political pressure as well. So agriculture is doing quite well, and recently, because of the spike in commodity prices, the mining industry has also been doing quite well, thanks to Putin. So the mining industry has been doing quite well as well. But that's a relatively smallish part of the South African economy.
Right. Well, look, I just want to say that I heard a joke which I think is so relevant when we talk about South Africa. And there are three guys or three people walking down the road, okay? There's Elle Macpherson, who's this beautiful model from the 1960s, 1970s, gorgeous-looking woman. There's Superman, and there's Pinocchio. And they're walking down this road. Have you heard this joke?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, well, you know the final one where Pinocchio goes into this competition, and the other two have already won, and he goes in there, and he comes out a couple of minutes later, and he says, "Who's Cyril Ramaphosa?" Now, I think that kind of sums up how South Africa sees the ANC. I think the whole population has woken up to the fact that, they're just lying the whole time. When we look at Pala and this money under the money in the furniture, you said the South African Reserve Bank are doing a really great job. Why aren't they acting against Ramaphosa on this? Because that's a huge amount of money, and clearly there's something very strange going on there.
Well, it's not impossible for the Reserve Bank to act. I would like to. In fact, if I was Ramaphosa, I would have resigned. But he's still getting the support of most of his members of his political party.
It's mafia. They're all mafia. Yeah. Sorry, back to you. That's my view.
Yeah. I hope the Reserve Bank is going to do something. But what we have in South Africa is foreign exchange regulations. You're not allowed to have foreign currency.
Yeah.
for a long time anyway. You have to deposit that at the registered currency trader like a bank, for example.
Yeah.
So you're not allowed to have that. So on the face of it, it seems as if the president broke that specific law because he had foreign currency quite a lot, something like $600,000, which he was not allowed to have. But apparently, that was brought into the country and it was declared, apparently. So now let's see how the thing is going to play out. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I can tell you there are a couple of questions that I have. One is, why can the president have so much foreign currency in his possession? Did he pay taxes on selling these cattle or buffalo, whatever he sold to this foreign guy?
It was 20 buffalo.
Yeah, so there are many questions around this. We haven't seen the end of this. So let's see if the Reserve Bank is going to act. But yes, technically the Reserve Bank can act against somebody that's got foreign currency in their possession.
Now, as we're talking, the ANC are actually having a huge indaba where they're going to be picking their next president-elect for the next 4 years. And it looks like it's going to be Ramaphosa again. Now,
that's what it looks like, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you consider what Arthur, I forgot what his surname is, but the fellow who actually, I think it's Franken or something like that, who actually Arthur Fraser, who actually put this complaint into the police. There's a huge disconnect here for, I think, 99% of the population. If they had $100, they would feel like they're rich.
Yeah.
And here their president has got the original figure was $4 million US, and I think there were Botswana Pula and all this sort of stuff stuffed in furniture on his farm at Pula Pula. And these, the average person in South Africa doesn't have 5 cents to rub together. How are they perceiving this?
Yeah, the confidence levels in South African, and I think the World Bank's got a nice set of various indices.
Yeah.
And they measure confidence in South African. Confidence in the police and confidence in the South African economy and confidence in government is at rock bottom at the moment. People are very poor. I don't think people understand what real poverty is. For instance, you can employ somebody in South Africa for if you pay somebody, say, $300 a month, a salary of $300 a month, US dollars a month.
Yeah.
Now that is even less than that. If you can pay somebody, say, $150 a month.
Yeah.
$150 a month. If you pay somebody that, you will have thousands of people applying for that job.
Yeah, I can believe it. Now, mate, I know this is something that we have differing perspectives on, but I think that's good, because I think it's good to debate stuff. And when we come to talking about South Africa is part of the world. So what I'm going to be talking about now is a larger global perspective, and you know where this is going. I can see the smile on your face.
Yeah.
Now, let's kick off with the central bank digital currencies. They're going to result in every branch of every bank in every little town in every little city in South Africa shutting down, all those people losing their jobs, because the central bank digital currency is run through one digital computer software program.
Yeah, come on, Scott. Come on.
Let
me help you out here. Yeah, let me help you out.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, let's just first, and I must admit, and I agree with you, central bank digital currencies are going to be very, very powerful weapons in the hands of bureaucrats. Let's understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a way out, yeah. So, but let's just understand how it works, and let's just sort of get a bit of a grip on how the system is going to work.
Okay.
And how it can work. And in fact, there are some central banks that already have their own central bank digital currencies.
Yeah.
So
China's a good example where they've got the social credit system. That's another story. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, but that's similar. That's pretty much similar.
Yeah.
So what is a central bank digital currency? Central bank digital currency is a currency is money that is created by a central bank, and it is like what we have at the moment. Normal fiat money is also mostly digitized. You can use your cell phone.
Oh yeah, in your bank account. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that is pretty much digitized. But what happens is your central bank, in a normal and in simple terms, how it works, your central bank will create money and credit the account of a bank at the central bank.
Yeah.
And then the bank will have credit, will have access to money, dollars or rands or yen or whatever the case is. And then the banks is responsible to distribute credit. So banks will lend out money to you and me, and we'll make deposits at the bank. So that's how the system roughly works. When it comes to, but it means that if I borrow R1 or $1 or whatever the case may be, it is still $1. And the banks are responsible for keeping a record of how much my deposits are at the bank and how much I've borrowed from the banks and so on. So it's a very complicated system, a financial system, but that's roughly how it works.
Yeah.
When you talk about the central bank, a digital currency, like a crypto kind of currency for central banks, there's one major difference. And the major difference is that a digital currency, like Bitcoin, for example, or many of these other ones, can be programmable. Now, what does it mean if a currency is programmable? It means that you can change the nature of that currency. At the moment, if I have R100 in my hand or $100 in my hand, physical cash in my hand, I can walk around and I can buy whatever I want to with this money, and nobody will know about that transaction unless they see me, for example. But it will be my $100 or $100, and it's between me and whoever sells me something to conduct the transaction. If I put my money in digital form, like a digital rand, as an example, I can transfer money from my bank account to your bank account as well. And pretty much I can do that freely. But when it's a programmable currency, it means that I can only use that specific currency for purposes that the central bank reckons are appropriate. So, for example, if you have a central bank digital currency, and the central bank decides to program this currency and allow you to buy food with this only and not alcohol, they can do that.
Yeah,
so they can tell you.
So you go to a liquor store and they'll just say, no, transaction not approved.
Yeah, not approved. I can't buy because the central bank, but there are many other things that they can do with this currency as well.
Yeah.
They will have full information about how I use this currency. There's some more. Some subtleties that we have to understand as well, but they will have full information about all transactions that I've entered into, and they can decide, for example, I've been naughty because I've been criticizing government and therefore they're going to take away half my money. Yeah. So those are the kind of things in the extreme that the central bank can do, and that is possible to do that. However, central banks are not in the game of distributing credit. And if central banks want to get into the game of distributing credit, they basically must create a whole new financial system. And I'm pretty sure they don't want to do that, and I'm pretty sure they can't do that, at least not for a long time. So they would try to keep the banks in the system as well. And I've got a suspicion that in practice what we're going to see is that the banks will be part of the system. If the central bank become completely totalitarian, then there won't be much of a function left for banks, and banks will close down as well. And I'm sure central banks wouldn't want to do that because they can't do that. It's too much. It's too complicated, the system. So if they make use of of central bank digital currencies, they will somehow keep the banks in the loop as well. And that means that the control over the central bank digital currency will be less draconic than what I've just explained, because banks will be part of this whole system. So that is probably how the system is going to look like in future. Additional to that, if we don't like what central banks are doing, because we can see that they take my money away, or they prevent me from buying alcohol or whatever because it's programmable, then I'm simply going to say, listen, I don't trust this currency anymore. I don't want this currency anymore. I don't want to be paid in this currency anymore. I'm going to start using private sector digital currencies like Bitcoin, for example. And that's what I think the future is going to look like. You are going to see central bank dominated digital currencies going forward, which will be programmed to a certain extent, and which will include the financial system like banks, for example. And you will have, in competition to that, private sector digital currencies as well, which will fulfill certain functions and which will specialize in certain things. A good example is Bitcoin, for example, and I know Bitcoin is not the favorite the last couple of months, but Bitcoin as an example could be used as a store of value. So I keep my money stored in Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is too expensive to transact in. So I can't buy bread with Bitcoin. I can, but it's too expensive. So I convert some of my Bitcoin into another digital currency like Ether, for example, which is cheaper to transact in, and I use that in my phone to buy bread or alcohol, whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
So that's what I think the future is going to look like. It will be it will be different, completely different. The function of banks will change. The nature of money is going to change, but there will always be more competition between. And I also believe, remember, if in central banks, the big ones, like the Americans and the Chinese and the Indians and so on, they are already thinking about, and some of them have their own central bank digital currency. There's a central bank digital rupee already, and a renminbi already, or yuan already, and many other central banks are, and even the South African central bank is doing some research on central bank digital currencies. So, but I think in future what's going to happen, because these things are basically information, and you can't stop information from flowing, and that means that it will be much easier for me now to get dollars, because you, Scott, you're simply going to send me dollars, and nobody can stop that. Even the central bank can't stop that. No, they can't. If they want to stop that, they have to switch off the internet.
No.
So you send.
This is the whole point, Dawie. You've trodden in a big hole here. I'll tell you why. Because you said it's programmable. Okay. Now that means that if your government doesn't like you, look what Justine.
No.
Hang on. Let me finish.
Okay.
Remember what happened with Justine Trudeau with the truckers? He said, okay,
Yes,
freeze their bank accounts. Now, this is the central bank. It's a centralized central bank digital currency. The difference between what they want to bring out and Bitcoin and Ethereum and Bitcoin is decentralized. In other words, they can't track the transactions you make. With the central bank digital currency, they can track everything you do, and if you're a naughty boy, they can shut you down like that. This is complete
that's
control.
not the point I want to make, Scott. No, you're right. Of course you're right. But the point I want to make is the following. And that is that, my apologies. Sorry, Scott. Sorry about that. The point I want to make is that we will have a lot of central bank digital currencies in the world.
Yeah.
And it will, and you can send me, you, Scott, can send me Australian dollars or US dollars or whatever, and it will not be possible for the South African government to stop you from sending me that, because it's basically information. It's like the Russians trying to, or anybody else, the Chinese trying to prevent people from getting access to certain news sites in the West, for example. It's not possible. You can make life difficult for them, but you can't completely stop that, because they can. They can still get access to these sort of things.
I need to interrupt you again, because I don't know if you've heard the news about what's happening in America. They've brought out a new law that any transaction over $600 US, you have to actually fill in a document explaining where the money came from. This is for the tax office in America, and what it was for. So that what they're trying to suggest is that this is for tax reasons.
Yeah, but
hang on. Let me just finish, Dawie. It used to be $20,000. They're now bringing it down to $600, and the suggestions have been made is that this is going to be the level that the central bank digital currency will monitor you at. This is a huge impost on anybody in the world.
But let me just make my point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my point is, so what I see the future of money, what I think the future of money is going to look like is more or less the following. We will have these central bank digital currencies which are programmable, and which will probably be programmable only to a limited extent, which are dangerous in the hands of bureaucrats.
Absolutely.
And you will have private sector digital currencies as well. But the point I want to make is that it will be much more difficult for the South African government to prevent me from getting my hands on digital dollars, as an example.
If it was Bitcoin or Ethereum.
But let me finish my point.
Okay, go ahead.
And that means that the South African currency, the rand, for example, it will be much easier for me simply to ignore the South African currency, the rand. And I can say, listen, I don't want to use the rand anymore. I want to use the dollar because I've got more confidence in the dollar. And I suspect in future, smaller currencies like the rand and those sort of currencies are going to disappear. And they will be replaced by other kinds of currencies, like the bigger ones, the ones in which we have more confidence. And they will have things like, and there will be competition with private sector currencies as well. So that's what I suspect what the future is going to look like.
Okay, well, look, I have to say that this is a subject that I would love to talk to you about in a just a separate live stream, because I have done so much research on central bank digital currencies, and I know this is a huge red flag, and I know it's tied up with the World Economic Forum, which I know you don't you don't think they have that much influence. But mate, I have to tell you that this is part of the one world government. This is a huge part of the whole story. But anyway, let's let's move on. Now, part of this whole thing with having the central bank digital currency, and you said it's programmable, part of this is the social credit system that's been trialed in China, and it's now been unrolled, believe it or not, here in Australia. They're actually now talking about bringing in a social credit system which will be tied up with your digital wallet. So just like in China, if you don't accept what the government does, they just cut you off. Now, now think about traditional cash. You got a 200 rand banknote in your hand. You can go into a shop and you can buy and exchange. When you're stuck with this digital shit, that's it. You're stuffed, aren't you?
Come on, Scott. No, and look at the advantages. I mean, it's going to be so much cheaper, so much easier. And
only if you can access it. Of
course, politicians will misuse their power. They always do that. But it's not the first time that there will be all these politicians trying to grab as much power as that. We've seen this through history every time. And we've had revolutions, and we've toppled them, and we've replaced them, and also see what's happening. What's happening in China at the moment? People are getting tired of lockdown.
Absolutely they are, but that's called communism. It's not called democracy. So what's happening is this move from traditional cash to a centralized controlled currency is communism. It's part of the one world government where people will be subservient to a small elite clique. And look, it's not rocket science. I can see you shaking your head. But this is a subject.
No, come on, Scott. No, come on. Now listen, what you need to do, just stand back for a moment. Of course, there are all these sort of movements and politicians and all that. I don't disagree with you on that. But just stand back and say where we came from only the past 100 years. Where we are today and where we came from 100 years ago. Yeah. Where we've got far more real democracy today. We've got much higher levels of standards of living today. We are far more open-minded today than 100 years ago. And it's so much better than 100 years today than 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, we also spoke about conspiracies and world governments and that sort of stuff. You always get these sort of things. But they say, if it gets out of hand, we will make a plan. We always make a plan. There's always revolutions and things happening. Of course. But believe me, politicians will try to...
Dawie, the war in Ukraine, as you would know, is now being done through drones. The drones go in and they hit a target. It's not traditional people running along the ground and fighting each other. When we talk about under a one world government, it won't be you have your democratic right. It'll be a bunch of robots who will be standing out there outside you will have no chance, because they will have sophisticated shit that will, it doesn't matter if you got 1 million people there, they will just shoot you into oblivion. But
you know what you do? You become a programmer and you hack into the system and that's what you do.
Dawie, we're talking about a stage in our lives where we can actually do transitional change and stop what's happening. Because right now, I don't know if you've heard of what Harari which is Klaus Schwab's little sidekick has been saying about how humans are, that they can actually hack into the brain and they can actually make you do stuff you don't want to do. This is what they're about. I'm not bullshitting you here. This is what the World Economic Forum are talking about. And your president, Ramaphosa, and funny enough, Patrice Motsepe is actually on the board of the World Economic Forum. And these guys are going there the whole time. They're getting their instructions. They've been told what to do. And here we are. We're sort of like sheep in a pen, just doing as if nothing's happening. There's a whole lot of stuff going on that we're not aware of.
Do you think 100 people, 1,000 people, or even 1 million people somewhere will be able to control the rest of the world's population because they've got access to these leaders and not the rest of us? That's not possible. Of course, it's been. There are many examples in history where we were forced to do things that we didn't want to do. And what happened? We toppled those governments. A huge upheaval, a lot of people die, whatever the case. But these conspiracy things are just nonsense, man.
Dawie, let's diarize to have this discussion in 10 years' time, if we can, if we're still able to get on the internet, if we're still able to talk freely. Well, look, I can assure you that the way I see it is totally different, because what
So, Scott, let me give you an example. I'm an economist. I'm an analyst.
Yeah.
I look at numbers and I analyze that and try to understand what is going on. Now, I can tell you the things that I say about our government. Now, sometimes, I mean, my eyes stand up straight. If I think, what have you just said about, you've heard what I said about the South African government. Now, imagine saying that 30 years ago. I mean, they will lock me up. There's no way. I've got far more freedom today than 30 years ago. I can say things like we've got a corrupt and incompetent government, and I say that to them, and I say that on government-controlled news sites.
Well, let me give you a reality check. Have you seen the amendments to the Terrorism Act in South Africa?
Yes, I have.
Okay, now look, these are hugely problematic, and I'm going to tell you what's happening here in Australia. And it's happening in New Zealand, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in the United Kingdom, all at the same time. Just get that. This is not happening like South Africa's doing this independently. It's happening around the world at the same time. So here in Australia, to use Facebook, to use Twitter, or to have a YouTube channel in the near future, you will have to first go to the government's MyGov website. You will have to register your 100 points, identification like a passport, and driver's license and stuff like that. If you don't do that, you will not be able to have a social media account. Now, hang on. Let me just finish. And the other part of this is that when you've done that, the government, their agencies can track everything you say and do through your social media. This is coming to Australia now. I put a video up about it on Loving Life TV earlier today, and it's coming from the mainstream media talking about it. And just in Parliament yesterday, this is the Federal Parliament of Australia, they were saying that the government agencies are looking into people who are putting out their conspiracy theories because they're looking at shutting them down. Now, you talk about freedom of speech. This is bullshit.
Can I tell you what you do? Do you have an avatar? Do you?
Do I have an avatar?
Yeah.
You mean like a miscellaneous account?
No. Like, have you digitized yourself?
No.
Have you created an avatar of yourself?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No, but you better just start doing that then.
Yeah, but that avatar needs 100 points before it can do anything.
No, you don't. No, you don't go to a private sector site and you create an avatar, you create a Scott persona, and you get one of these you get a nice picture of a nice little gadget.
So Tom Cruise, I'll be Tom Cruise.
Whatever you want to, and you put that on the blockchain, that is you. And you link that to a non-fungible coin, an NFT, and nobody can take that away from you. That's you. It becomes you. And you can put that on any social media platform, on a private sector social media platform, and nobody can stop you. Nobody.
Well,
The only way they can stop you switching off your internet.
well, that's the other thing, is that I have to have an account with one of the internet companies. And what they're suggesting is that if
No,
I
you don't.
Well, how do
You go on
I...
Wi-Fi. You go on public Wi-Fi. You download a virtual private network via VPN.
I've got a
download
VPN. I've got it, but how do you pay? How do you pay? We're so far off the economic shit at the moment. It doesn't matter. How do you pay the company that's actually providing you the access? Because they'll need your address, so they know where you live. That's not going to work.
But I can go anywhere, to an airport or to a cafe,
but
and I can log into the Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi is fine, but how about having where you're connected to fiber? You've got no friggin' chance.
No, of course I have, because that Wi-Fi is connected to fiber.
Yeah, no, but I can understand with Wi-Fi, as you say, you can go to an airport and you can do all this sort of stuff with an avatar. But to actually be sitting behind a desk where you've got a fiber connecting you to the internet, the company providing you that fiber access knows where you live, and of course that ties up with your digital ID.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Now, there are some countries in the world, like Iran is a very good example,
Yeah.
where if they catch you with pornography, you're gonna be in
You're going to be swinging from the trees. Yeah.
Now, why is it that government is not capable of stopping pornography coming into that country? I am from the old South Africa. I know what it was like. Pornography was illegal in the old South Africa.
Oh, look, mate, I'm the old fart in the room. And I have to tell you, when I was 18 years old, my first holiday was from KwaZulu-Natal into Swaziland with a good friend of mine. And the reason we went there was because we were dying to see what a Playboy looked like. And the first thing we did, we got to Swaziland, was to buy a couple of Playboys just so we could see.
Do you think it is possible then to stop pornography? Is it possible? It's not possible.
Yeah. But that's one of the social.
That's a good example.
No,
because
but
that is
Dawie,
information. You cannot stop information from flowing. It's information.
Dawie, let me just. You raised a really interesting point, but this is from a moral perspective, because there are so many huge pornographic sites that you can just Google, and they'll come up,
yes.
And a child of 10 years old can access them at night and stuff like that. I mean, it is wrong, and yet on platforms like YouTube, if you dare challenge what the World Health Organization is saying about COVID-19, they will pull you down in a flash. I mean, this is...
I know that, but don't use YouTube.
No, but the point Dawie, the point I'm making is that that's the control. They decide. Now listen to me. They decide what you're allowed to see and what you're not allowed to see. And they're happy for kids of 10 years old to see pornography because they're trying to bring the whole family structure down. That's the whole point.
I don't think they're happy with kids watching pornography. But Scott, you know what's going to happen to this video that we're making now?
I don't know, but we're so far off the economy. Let's get back onto the economy. Okay, so now we've talked about Eskom. Now, what would happen to South Africa's economy if Eskom went totally down? In other words, it just crashed. Now that the rate
that is possible. Now we've got we've been talking about load shedding. We've got various stages of load shedding.
Yeah, you're on 7 or 8 at the moment.
We're at 6, I think, about somewhere there.
Yeah, whatever they call it.
It doesn't bother me because I've got my own solar panels and batteries.
I know you're done. You're good. Yeah.
I'm waxed.
Except on the farm, you have a problem on the farm.
Yeah, there could be a bit of a problem. But the big issue with electricity coming on and off, electric appliances don't survive. So there's a lot of breakages and because of that.
Oh, yeah.
But what's going to happen if the whole system really come crashing down? Then I'm afraid we're talking about some serious stuff in this economy. We're talking about the deep recession, a lot of social upheaval, and simple things that you won't be able to get access to cash. The ATMs won't work. Crime will become a major problem. So it will be really, really bad. The management, the current management, which resigned, I think they're pretty much on top of that. I don't think there will be a complete and total collapse of Eskom. What they will do, we will get higher and higher levels of so-called load shedding, and which in itself will be hugely damaging to the economy as well. So yes, you're absolutely right. Eskom is the single biggest danger to the South Africa. Well, actually the ANC is, but because of that, Eskom has become the single biggest obstacle to economic growth, and it can really lead to a lot of economic chaos in South Africa. For now, I don't think we're going to see a complete and total collapse. I don't think that is going to happen. And in the meantime, people are making plans. Let me give you another example of how things are improving. I've done some calculations. You will take a certain number of units of electricity to produce 1 unit of GDP growth, as an example. Now, I've calculated how many electricity we required to produce 1 unit of economic growth. And I've compared 10, the power just came on back, by the way. So I've compared that. You see, you didn't even see a flicker because my system works quite well. So I've compared that to how many units of electricity we use today to 20 years ago. And we've improved our electricity productivity in South Africa by nearly 20%. Really. So we use 20% less electricity than to create 1 unit of GDP than 20 years ago, and that's a dramatic improvement. But the reason why it happened is because of electricity prices going up and the unavailability of electricity, sure, but also we made a plan, and we will always make a plan, and that's what the private sector does. I'm not concerned about all these conspiracy nonsense and all that, because we will make a plan.
Dawie, I deal with the people on the street, you deal with the high rollers. Let me tell you, the people on the street, they're telling me that there are thousands of small businesses closing down right now because of what's going on with the load shedding. And I just want to ask you this simple question. Do you agree with me that the best thing that anyone in South Africa can do right now, considering the issues with Eskom and electricity, is to go to the bank and obviously don't draw out too much cash so that the Reserve Bank or the South African Revenue Service start asking questions, but go and get yourself a whole lot of small change. You know, the 20 cent, the $2 coin, the $5 coin, the 10 rand, the 50 rand. Have cash, because if electricity goes down, that piece of plastic in your hand, you might as well go and put it on a fire, because it won't be worth anything.
Yeah, no, it's always a good idea to have some cash. Always. I mean, my kids, I have taught them from small, if you go out or whatever, make always sure that you have some cash. Yeah. I've learned from a very from experience that to be stuck in a foreign country on an airport in the middle of the night without any cash is not a very nice thing. So I've learned from
Which country? Which country was that?
That was Russia. When we began here. My credit cards didn't work. Because of sanctions against Russia. And I spent all my rubles, and we couldn't get on the plane because of some technicalities with passports and so on. Yeah. And there I was in the middle of the night with a hysteric wife and 2 crying children without any cash.
Wow.
And that's not... Anyway, but we made a plan. We always do.
As you do. Absolutely. Dawie, look, it's coming up to nearly an hour, and look, it's been a really interesting chat. Look, I love chatting to you because we have totally different perspectives on things, but I think we're both learning and getting to know what each other's perspectives are, and I think that's important. Yeah. I'm going to put one final question to you before we wrap this up, and that is to do with what the World Economic Forum always talk about, and that is public-private partnerships. Now, to me, that's a huge red flag, because when they talk about public-private partnerships, what they're actually talking about is, like in South Africa, the police force becoming run by security services. In other words, it's a private company running what used to be a government service. And if you take the absolutely abysmal public health system, it's like the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation coming in there and saying, we'll run your hospitals, but we're going to do this on a commercial basis. And then all of a sudden, the government's doing nothing, but it's now being run by private companies. Now, this is what the World Economic Forum are pushing around the world. And I don't know if you've heard Klaus Schwab talk much, but he always talks about our stakeholders. Now, the stakeholders are the people who are the people behind those companies that are going to be in the public-private partnerships. In other words, what they're talking about is the people who are going to run the country in that particular area. Do you think there's a danger with this whole concept of public-private partnerships when it comes to a country?
Yeah, of course. Of course there's a huge danger in this, because what happens basically is that the government goes into some sort of agreement or some sort of partnership with a private sector company, and inevitable that means that this private sector company must get some sort of extra protection from the state, and we've seen there are many examples of this in history and today. And inevitably what will happen is that this company will try to prevent other companies from competing with it, and they will put pressure on government to create all sort of laws keeping competition out. And then eventually what's going to happen is that there will be some reaction from a public saying, listen, but we don't want to make use of this company anymore, they've become too expensive, and then eventually we will get another company. These sort of things happen all the time. There are many examples of this. A good example is in South Africa. Die Verenigde Oos-Indische Compagnie, for example.
That was a Dutch India company from the 1650s.
That was a Dutch, that was a Dutch company under protection of the state, and that came to an end because they become highly inefficient and corrupt, and it always happens like this. There are many examples. Look, for example, at the cell phone companies, or internet companies.
But
they are basically monopolies.
Darby, let's get real. The difference between 1650 and 2022 is, in one word, technology. In other words, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will be running the world in 10 years' time.
Good thing. But remember, technology is not only for politicians in the state to use. You can use technology as well, and go and do it.
Okay, Darby, I'll tell you why it's a bad thing. Okay, and I'd love you to do a bit of research on this, because Bill Gates has been named as one of the 38 shadow ministers of the One World government, and that's official. Bill Gates. When they bring in a One World government, Bill Gates is going to be one of the shadow government parliamentarians or ministers.
Okay, Scott. I've heard that the moon is made of cheese. But it was wonderful. It was wonderful talking to you.
Mate, look, as I say, in 10 years' time we'll have this discussion again, and we'll see who's on the board. Look, we'll obviously talk a lot before then, but all right, mate, look, it's been lovely chatting to you, and have a great evening or great day.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, mate.
All the best.
Bye for now.
Bye.
All right, guys, that was my pre-recorded discussion with Dawie Roodt, and I do apologize. We got off track a few times, but it's nice to just have it like a fireside chat where you kind of just stretch the boundaries and talk about things that you find relevant at that point in time, and that's what we did. Now, I think we still have one live stream organized for next week, and obviously after that we're going to be winding up for Christmas, and we'll be restarting or doing live streams again probably from the second week of January. So between about the 20th of December until about the 7th of January next year, I will be putting up videos from time to time. The daily email I send out to registered subscribers on Loving Life TV, they'll be quite intermittent, and you can understand why. But I just want to take this opportunity and say to everybody, be safe, have a great festive season, have a happy new year, and just let's all pray about where the world is going, because it's not going in a good place, unfortunately. All right, I'm going to go out as we normally do with one of our theme songs, and this time I'm going to go out with Hier bly ek boer. But before I do, I just want to say to all the moderators, thanks guys for the great job you've done this year in the side chat. You're a huge part of the Loving Life family. And I just want to say to everybody who's joined us tonight, thank you for joining us, because you are part of our Loving Life community. And it's always been a nice community come family of people who interact, and we're all learning through these live streams, and that's really important. All right, guys, I've burbled enough. I'm going to put on our last theme song for the year. Here we go. Bye for now.
Meer as 61,000 van ons voorvaders het op die grens van ons gesterwe, sodat ons vry kan wees. Die is my land, die is my reg, hier is ek boer. Van stof is ek gemaak en sal ek terugkeer. Die Bybel is die woord waaruit ek leer, soos die grond op die aarde. Hier bly ek boer. So diep in die nacht sal die vyand kom, maar hier bly ek staan en ek draai nie om, want jy maak my nie bang nie. Hier bly ek boer. Die is my land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my zweet, my rug. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voer. Hier bly ek wat Manikiru kon sing, soos hy stap deur die lande. Hier was hy boer. My wortels lê diep in die grond geplant. Hy sien soos my pa, los ek vir jou die land, en jy hoef nie te vrees nie. Hier sal jy boer. My land waarvoor ek sal veg. Die is my bloed, my zweet, my rug. Die is die plek waar my voorvaders leef. Die is my land, hoor wat ek jou sê. Die is my land, wat my mense voer. Hier bly ek boer. Die sal kom, sal kom, die leeu 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 sal kom,